Again, thanks for joining us right after lunch. I know it's tough to follow lunch, but it's almost as tough as it is to precede lunch. I'm sure we'll have some stragglers coming in as we proceed, though. So as Paul said, I'm Jim Cook. I'm the CEO of Actions Impact Strategies, and I'm also affiliated with Connected DMV, and I serve as the chair for the Center for Responsible Quantum and AI. And joining me today for this policy discussion is, of course, Paul Stimers, Executive Director for the Quantum Industry Coalition, Alex Choquette from IBM, Global Strategic Research Development Team, and he's also the leader for the Sustainability Quantum Technical Working Group. And at the end of the row here is Ryan McKenney, Director of Government Relations and General Counsel for Compliance at Quantinuum. So again, thank you guys for joining us today. The focus of this discussion around the changing policy landscape with the, as is always the case with new administrations, there's shifts in direction. As those of you who are here this morning heard Michael Kratsios talk about reinvigorating and updating the National Quantum Initiative. In that context, there has been language already emerging that has changed in terms of the vision and priorities for the administration. And part of the discussion this afternoon is going to be about how material is that? What do we really see changing in the policy landscape? How do you envision it impacting the rate of innovation, the ability to commercialize and adopt quantum technology and AI technology and their intersection? So I'd like to get started really, since we have a short period of time, with that first question. Given the changes that you see happening in terms of language, is it material? Is it significant? Moving away from terms like trustworthy and ethical and focusing on responsible development and use of the technology. How significant a change is that in your all's mind? Paul, you want to go start us?
Sure, thank you. And let's see, is this working? Yeah, there we go. I think it's significant in that the Trump administration is taking more of a hands-off role relative to AI development, especially in terms of a focus on avoiding the creation of AI rules that would promote particular worldviews or content. The Trump administration has seen that as a real danger that they believe existed in the previous administration, giving government the opportunity to sort of put a thumb on the scale in terms of what AI said and how it behaved, and they're trying to at least avoid that, if not maybe nudge it in the other direction. Couldn't say, but I think that's part of it. The other part of it is that this administration very much views AI as a race, as something that is going to be our own development of AI is not taking place in a vacuum. It's taking place against development of AI by authoritarian regimes elsewhere in the world, and in particular in China. And so there's a tremendous concern that by over-regulating AI, we will merely cede that leadership and cede the ability to determine what AI looks like to competitors that don't like us very much.
So just to follow on before we move on, what do you think that portends for quantum in terms of how that will all relate to what they do from a quantum perspective?
I think what we're going to see from the administration very shortly is a set of quantum activities that looks very much like what we saw in the AI space. That is to say, a national plan along with a couple of or a handful of executive actions, whether those are executive orders or something similar. I think you'll see a lot of activity that is directed at the Department of Commerce. That's going to look like international standards. That's going to look like intellectual property protection. It'll look like promotion of U.S. business interests worldwide on the quantum scale. All things that you saw in the AI plan and the associated actions. You'll see the Department of Energy have a significant role, as we heard earlier today, and you'll see a number of other agencies.
So, Alex, from your perspective, as you look at what's happening in the U.S. and then think globally, what's your take on what you see, not just with the policy changes in the U.S., but how does that look on a global scale?
Yeah, that's a great question. I also want to preface this. So I'm not exactly an American, so I live across the border in Canada. So I have a third-person view on what's going on in the state. And moreover, I also don't operate in policy. My role is to grow research ecosystem around IBM technology here. So I'm kind of more seeing what the impact of the policy is rather than say the governmental or the regulation side of it. So yeah, for sure, probably the main impact that we're seeing is the ability for countries outside of the U.S. to collaborate with people in the U.S., especially if you're building a lot of walls around the technologies in AI and quantum, to protect the technology within the country. For example, as you mentioned, I lead the sustainability working group. So that's an international technical working group. We're trying to bring experts from all over the world and quantum, AI, domain experts to come up with use cases. But for most of the workshops that we're trying to organize, we're seeing the presence of Americans kind of declining over time. And not that we don't want to collaborate with the American researchers because they're truly excellent, but it does put some barriers to innovation there. And likewise, like I've attended a few conferences, technical conferences in the US in the last year, where historically there has been a lot of Canadians going to these conferences, but now the community there is decreasing also. So yeah, maybe that's an impact that we're seeing on the quantum side.
Okay. Great, thank you. Brian?
Sure, I'll echo some of what Paul said. I think the changes we've seen in nomenclature going from safeguarding promotion of ethical AI to Trump executive orders both in January and the AI action plan in July, having nomenclature and verbiage such as removing barriers to U.S. leadership in AI, accelerating American AI dominance, exporting AI preeminence, those types of language underlie what are, I think, already significant policy changes and ones that will continue to be so. Obviously, this administration loves deals. This administration wants to remove barriers such that U.S. AI companies are creating global standards and a global stack to be used across the world. Some of that is driven by concerns about China. A lot of that is just driven by we want to promote U.S. businesses. And so I think the results of those executive orders are already flowing down through the private sector, and the AI action plan lays that out pretty significantly, both in terms of promoting AI infrastructure at home, building more and more data centers. You've seen the promotion of the Stargate piece, which may have $500 million towards, 500, is it 500 billion? Is that the original? With a B, that's okay. It sounded crazy, but it is true. Really promoting U.S. AI infrastructure, and so building out these data centers such that we are exporting AI from America to the rest of the world. And then I think to secondly underscore Paul's point, we expect and have already seen some signaling mechanisms about quantum that are similar to that. We do expect some executive actions in the near term. We expect quantum to be part of some of the UK announcements this week with President Trump and Prime Minister Starmer in the UK. And this removing of barriers such that U.S. hardware and software for both technology and AI are exported. And so I don't think it's just a change in nomenclature and language from the executive level, though that's how it started. But as more and more folks are confirmed across the U.S. federal government, and as more of these policies take shape over the next 3.5 years, we expect that to be a significant policy shift.
So Ryan, this is out of left field. This is the crystal ball question I always ask Paul, but you're going to get it this time. So how does all that play out in Congress? Because Congress plays a role here too. And this time last year, we were talking about whether or not there was ever going to be an update to the National Quantum Initiative Act. So what do you think potentially could happen there? How does this play out?
On September 30th, which is less than 2 weeks away now, it will be 2 years since the National Quantum Initiative was due to be reauthorized, and it has been a long slog. That is Paul knows better than anybody. And that is not driven at all by the fact that quantum is not a bipartisan issue. Quantum is an extremely bipartisan issue. Everyone from very strong national security Republicans to very workforce-driven Democrats all agree that quantum is really important, that it's important for national security, that it's important for economic security. I do think we are finally at a place, partially because of some of these administration changes and the administration pushing Congress, partially just from this realization. I've been going on to the Hill for 4+ years now talking about quantum, and the amount of quantum knowledge across Congress has never been higher. The recognition of quantum as an absolutely critical U.S. asset has never been higher, and I really do think in the next few months we'll see some hearings, we'll see some drafts coming out from the Senate Commerce Committee. I've already seen a great hearing on May 7th in the House Science Committee. We've seen the House that committee previously pass out a version of the NQIA, and I think we are at a point where we're hopefully at a tipping point, at an inflection point where we can get NQIA reauthorized and keep talking about some of the other issues related to quantum policy, the domestication, the friendshoring and onshoring of the supply chain related to cryogenics, related to optics and photonics, building U.S. quantum chips so we don't need a CHIPS Act in 15 years the way we did for semiconductors. And this is driven between the White House and Congress as well, but I think we're really seeing some positive movement.
Great, thanks. So one of the stated goals of a lot of these policy actions is to accelerate innovation, commercialization, and adoption of the technology. So Alex, let's start with you from your perspective. What are some of the actions that you and in your organization like IBM as builder would like to see, including changes in the regulatory environment, but other things that you think need to be enacted from a policy perspective that may allow you to accelerate the pace of development and balance risk and responsible use?
Yeah, that's a great question because there's so many things the U.S. government and governments around the world could do to accelerate the adoption. I think we're starting to be at a stage where, for the longest time so I'll speak for quantum computing. I know quantum means more than just computing, but at least in quantum computing, we were at a stage where the hardware was the limiting factor. We might have some good ideas of things we wanted to run on the hardware, but the hardware was not good enough to run anything of value. Now we're kind of in an inflection point. We're seeing it in all the hardware vendors' roadmap. There seems to be a stamp in the calendar around 2029, 2030, where this is where we're going to start to see fully fault-tolerant quantum computers coming up. So there's no doubt that there's going to be value to be extracted with these devices, but that's only if we know how to use these quantum computers. And I don't think that even if we snap our fingers now and we give you a fully fault-tolerant quantum computer with 1,000 logical qubits capable of 100 million gates, I don't think anybody will exactly know what to do with it. And if that solves a real-life use case. So we do need to push a lot on algorithm and application development. And there are some things on the policy side that could help. So we could start funding a lot more software and applications program, both in industry as well, and also education programs. Like, we do need to train a workforce that knows how to program quantum computers, not only how to build them, because not everybody can be operating and just building quantum computers. And the future quantum job is going to be in end-user industry, and they're going to be looking for people that know how to program the machine. Like, you're not hiring someone that knows how to build Excel. You're looking to someone that knows how to use Excel for the job. So yeah, education program, funding a lot of program, and also quantum is an inherently global technology. So programs that encourage international collaborations so that we can, bring a lot of the value that is being created outside the U.S., coming back to the country.
Okay. So relative to the international point you just made, yesterday at the International Forum, there was a discussion about commercialization in particular, and I know, Paul, you weighed in on that. So I'd like to ask you and Ryan specifically, when you think about the barriers to commercialization, and I think the general consensus was increased demand signal from government would begin to accelerate the pace of commercialization and bring more private investment in. What do you think some of the barriers are, aside from budgets, to driving that increased government demand, and how can some of that potentially be addressed through policy?
Yeah, so the Quantum Industry Coalition has said for a long time with respect to the reauthorizing the National Quantum Initiative that we want to see the White House, the National Quantum Coordination Office, or PCAST or somebody, go out to the agencies and say, we understand you have problems that you can't solve. Have you thought about using quantum computers to solve them? And really do almost like a tour of the government to build that demand. And it's because a lot of agencies just haven't thought about how quantum computing in particular can help them meet their missions. And then once you do that, then of course step 2 is, and how do you get one, or how do you buy the time? And then, in order to avoid picking winners and losers in the marketplace, or upending things based on sort of political considerations, then you have to be able to say, to put out the requirement that you have, to say, I have a problem and I'm willing to spend the following amount of money to solve it. And then it doesn't matter who solves your problem. It doesn't matter whether it's somebody with a quantum computer or a classical computer or a bunch of abacuses. Doesn't matter. They just solve the problem. And the act of doing those 3 things in succession is the demand signal, and will unlock the investment on the part of the private sector to solve those problems.
Ryan, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I agree. The end goal is government as customer and government as collaborator doing co-design work towards use cases. That is, I think, the best outcome that we at this point in industry could have is, I've started saying you cannot have an ecosystem without a system. We want government to buy our systems. We want government to buy quantum systems across modalities and across the industry. That's good for all of us as quantum companies. It's good for the US government from a workforce standpoint, such that the smartest engineers and folks at the national labs are putting their hands on machines today. It's great for algorithm development and use case development that people are working on today's systems, such that, to the point that was just made earlier, the point at which we have fully fault-tolerant hardware, we've built the algorithms, we've identified the use cases, and the US government is off to the races taking advantage of those systems. I think the bottleneck can oftentimes be we sometimes as industry get in our own way a little bit and we fight about which modality is best. We can oftentimes get overly technical to policymakers, and sometimes this leads to maybe some funding wanting to just wait. Let's wait till we have a fully fault-tolerant quantum computer and then we'll use it. We don't want to pick winners and losers. We don't want to waste taxpayer money in a very tight budgetary environment. Quantum still seems a long way off. Let's just get NQIA reauthorized, we'll deal with the rest later. And so we are trying very hard as industry, and it's really important to come together in groups like Paul's QIC and the QEDC to come with a more coherent message where we're all singing from the same sheet of music that, no, we don't have fault-tolerant quantum computers today, but these machines are already doing really interesting things. We're very much approaching the place where, especially for high-energy physics and some very discrete use cases, we can do things that no classical computer can do, and it is absolutely essential to build national quantum capabilities on today's machines, to put them in national labs, to put them in academic institutions, and to increase the collaboration between industry and the US government.
Okay, thanks. So I have one more question, but before I get to that, let me just pause for a moment and open it up, see if anybody in the audience has any questions for Paul, Alex, and Ryan before I go forward. Anything? There's a couple mics out there somewhere, so if you have any questions, because my final question is not just for them, but it's going to be for all of you as well. Any questions? All right. So the final thing that I wanted to talk about, so I mentioned at the beginning that my role as chair of the Center for Responsible Quantum and AI. For those of you who don't know, under the Potomac Quantum Innovation Center that Connected DMV hosts and the Quantum Initiative, we have launched this center to focus on this issue of responsible use, development and use of these technologies. The purpose of that center is to do something very akin to what Ryan was just mentioning, which is to bring cross-sector and cross-border representatives together to work on topics and challenges related to the innovation, adoption, commercialization of these technologies. Policy is a big part of that theme, but it's not exclusive to a conversation around policy. As Alex stated at the beginning, you know, as you said, you mentioned you weren't a policy person. That's exactly what we're trying to do in the center, is bring builders, buyers, developers, and policymakers together to talk about what do we need to do collectively and how can the policy framework that we operate within facilitate what we're trying to do ultimately, as opposed to be a barrier. And our focus is on producing tangible output, tools, frameworks, risk models, things that can be adopted by industry and government, things that can be adopted by in the community, both in the U.S. and globally. And so that's our mission, that's our charge. Everybody here is playing a role in some role in launching and executing that. So my question, given that is a forum that we've now created to have this conversation and do this joint work, is what are some of the major challenges that you all see, the three of you and the audience, to innovation, adoption, and commercialization that you think would benefit from having that type of cross-sector and cross-border collaboration to work through and produce tangible output that we can all act on? That's a mouthful, but that's really what we're trying to get to, is what are some of the things we ought to be working on? Should we be focusing on a risk framework that we can use to determine whether the development of a technology is responsible, or we're building in, you know, we're potentially encountering unintended consequences? But whatever it is that you all think is the barrier, the real tangible problems, blockers that need to be tackled, that's the purpose of the center. And so what are some of the things that sort of eat your lunch or keep you up at night that you think would benefit from that type of cross-collaboration? Start with you guys, but open it up to the audience. So we're looking to hear from everybody. Go ahead, Alex.
I mean, it's a monstrously big mission that you're setting up there, but one that is very needed. And the ingredients of a successful project has very little to do about technical abilities, right? You need to identify projects that are at the intersection of national priorities, funding opportunities, societal impact, but also quantum feasibility and so on and so forth. So the center could help the project teams to identify these other aspects of a successful project, and also being the middleman between people on the ground actually executing the science and innovating, and also the policy makers. From what I understand of the policy landscape, and you guys tell me, but it's more of a dialogue than a top-down approach, right? So as we're starting to understand what quantum can do, now is a good time to shape the policies so that it makes sense with what the technology can do. So being kind of the ears on the ground, so that you can report back to policymakers, so that they have policies that make sense, but also educating the project leaders about the existing policies that are there that could potentially be roadblocks, right? So if you can flag right away, okay, this is a great idea and I see the technical feasibility, but you're gonna run into a massive legal roadblock down the road. It's something that us researchers like to know beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Any other thoughts, Ryan, Paul? Anything from you all?
I think ideally we're trying to build guardrails that protect against some of the worst outcomes that we can anticipate, and especially on the AI side of things. We have a fairly clear idea, at least, of what some of the risks involved in quantum are. I think the risks on the AI side are many more and many more difficult to anticipate, and potentially is much more significant. So mitigating the risks, and ideally doing so by not by creating a massive regulatory structure. We'll let the EU try that and see how it goes. but rather than doing that, maybe provide some ways to align incentives such that the developers of these technologies take on the responsibility for the technologies a little more. Things like a clear liability regime, for example, such that the general counsel is sitting in the room with the board of directors and the CEO and so forth and saying, we could beta test this on all of humanity at large, but that might cost us the entire company, and so perhaps we ought to just, test it a little more first. That's not a regulatory approach. That's a liability approach, and it's one that may help mitigate some of the risks. At the same time, the guardrail approach means that for things that we agree are likely to be safe and helpful and effective, you can go faster. And that's something that the Trump administration is very much focused on, is how do we accelerate the things that we want while at the same time trying to mitigate some of the risks in a way that doesn't have its own negative effects.
Are there any questions or thoughts from any of you in the audience about that question, or any questions in general that you want to ask Ryan, Alex, and Paul? Yes, ma'am. Do we have
There's a microphone.
Microphone's
coming. Yep, it's working.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex. I'm representing a company called Phantom Photonics. We do quantum LiDAR, so sensing. And I was wondering, as a seed stage startup, what advice do you have for best interacting with policy priorities or helping shape them to enter the market, let's say?
I know what you're going to say.
No, thank you. So as the proprietor of an industry association, that's a very easy way to get involved without getting too involved, just to see how things go. And I'd be happy to have a conversation with you separately about that. As a lobbyist, I'm also happy to talk with you about how to engage a lobbyist. But seriously, those are two of the ways to do it, and whether it's the Quantum Industry Coalition and Holland and Knight or some other approach, that's a great way to get involved. And there are a number of different ways to do that. But it's especially in a highly regulated environment where there is a lot of federal technology development work and a lot of federal customers, it's important to know what's going on, to have relationships with those federal customers and regulators, and to be able to have an impact even as a small company. Thank you.
I'll add on to that one, echoing that my company is a member of both Paul's organization and QEDC. Tremendous value from the two-person academic startup to some of the largest companies in the world. Again, coming together as an industry is really important. And both for Congress and especially for this White House, industry voices matter. And I don't think there's been a better time to bring industry concerns, whether those are about workforce, whether those are about immigration law issues, whether those are about supply chain, whether that's about general funding of research and commercialization. Then now, both Paul's group and QEDC, we worked very, very closely for a long time about export controls, provided a lot of industry feedback about the importance of foreign nationals to U.S. companies and the work we do in the quantum sphere, how overly burdensome regulatory structures related to export control could hurt innovation and hurt America's leadership. And the result of the export controls that came out last September, went into effect last November, was highly affected by that industry coalition and those voices, and we're frankly quite happy with the result of those export controls because, again, we provided data, we spoke as one voice as industry, included everyone, again, from small businesses, academic institutions to large companies, and it was very much taken to heart by the Commerce Department and the Bureau of Industry and Security. So I think that is an example of a policy impact that led to a great regulatory structure that puts some guardrails in place, but still promotes U.S. innovation and promotes the export of critical American technology.
Good. So we are at time. So I want to at least try to keep us on schedule for the next session. I'd just like to say as a parting word, You'll be seeing more announcements about the center after QWC. We are looking for members. We are looking for people who want to participate. We're looking for people that bring challenges, questions, problems to us that you want us to work with you to solve. And relative to your question, that's another avenue in which we can talk to policymakers. We don't lobby, but we also want to, through the center, have a voice in the policy world where we can bring not just problems but active solutions that we want to propose. In true to Connected DMV's role as an educational organization, not a lobbying organization. So there's multiple paths to address the type of question that you raised. So if anything else comes to mind, please reach out to us, but look for that announcement. And we welcome any interest in joining or working with us, or just bringing questions forward for us to work with you on as we launch this new center. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Jim.